Okay. If you could just finish that story you were telling there.
Oh, so then the banks in Kalispell and Kalispell Mercantile had a big loan on it. And the superintendent, Coe, and the Washington office kept wanting them to come in and take their patent and fee out. And they kept writing and writing, and my aunt told them no, she didn't want to do that. They didn't ever apply for it, and they didn't want it. Well, then they'd take her up to Kalispell and try to get her to make payments on it. Well, before this all happened, we started to clean up the place, and I think I must have turned over about 500 head of horses, different bunches, real nice, well-bred horses, and they were credited with $4 a round at Parma. And my aunt had a bunch of pet cows, big black and blue roan cows. And I think I cut out 102 head of them. And they bid them in at the ranch $23 a round. And I got done, they were in, still in the hole 40-some thousand. So they got her in Polson one day and asked her to sign some papers. She says, the papers I signed wouldn't be worth the paper they wrote on. She says, I'm still a warrant to the government. But she says, you leave us alone, we'll pay you off. So every time we'd sell a bunch of steers, why, dry cows, she'd turn so much money to the bank. And that was about 30, I think. And just about a year or two before World War II hit, Angus, my cousin, he was running the ranch, and just about 2 years before he went to World War I or II, he paid that 40-some thousand off. And then he went to the Army, and a lot of the people in Sanders County were pretty mad about it because they said, God damn me, he was producing more beef around there than most of them fellers. But anyhow, he went to Germany, and he developed that self-corrosis. And he's at the old ranch now with one of his nieces, Archie's daughter. Just like a vegetable, it has to be fed. I guess he can listen to a TV. He can't read or anything like that. Can't watch TV. They have to feed him and everything. But he's still the same, don't seem to change.
How old is he?
He's born 1918.
So compared to you, he's just a young guy.
Yeah. Yeah, when I was taking care of the cattle for my aunt, he used to come from school, and I'd get him to drive team for him when I was feeding in the winter. Then in the spring and summer, we was always riding, gathering cattle or branding or something. He's always with me. And one time we started to cut out some beef. Had quite a few head of cattle in the corral. And he wanted to watch the gate, and I said, no. I said, you get in there and start cutting them cows out. I said, that's going to be your job one of these days. He was only 18 then. By the time he was 20 years old, he was a top hand, and he had a bunch of nice cows. Yeah, he had, when he got so he couldn't handle the ranch, he must have had about 60 head of registered Herefords, and I suppose he must have had 150, 200 grade cows. And he had a good ranch started. Everything had to be just so. But niece has got the old ranch now, and she's taking care of him.
How many acres is it?
I think they must have about 1,400 acres where the house is. Allotments and land they'd bought besides that. And then they had all that Mill Creek and Lozo country where they summer range.
Well, how about a lunch break?
Yeah, we can do that.
Fellowship back in D.C. at the Smithsonian, so I'll be looking at what materials they have about this. And then I'll come back, and next spring we'll finish it up and do the editing.
Yeah.
So I guess we could just leave this.
I was going to ask, anybody with old Joe Antiste?
Yeah, we interviewed Joe.
I say, is he alone?
Yes. There's some younger family members living with him.
Well, his adopted son, Tommy, must live close to him.
Yeah. Is that Tom that lives up there?
Right next door to him, I think. There's another trailer house right next to him.
He's married to, she's Cultamy from Marley.
Well, there are some people there, but a lot of the time he's there alone. And
That must be Tom and his wife.
yeah.
Tom works, I think, a lot out around Libby.
Uh-huh. He tells us he's lonely sometimes, but he enjoyed doing the interviews. He did it all in Kootenai, and Sophie Matt was there, and she translated for us. Well, I thought maybe could start again this afternoon if you could tell me something about the languages and what was being spoken around at the time you were growing up.
Well, when I was growing up, our language was English, and it was spoke a lot, every day in our house, Indian, Pondre, Salish. Once in a great while, some this first come, my dad would talk this first.
Was there a big difference between those languages?
Oh yeah, a lot of difference. Just like Kootenai and Pondre, big difference. But that's about all there was on the language deal that I know. It was, we talked English in our house, and my dad had talked to this old cousin of his, and Alec Bonaparte, why he talked Indian to him.
What about French?
Well, there's a lot of French. My granddad Dishaw talked French. And when I went to school in Ronan, there was, about all it was Indian kids, part Indian and full bloods, and a lot of French. Mission was full of French. All the Finleys, most all the Finleys talk French. Ashley's up around Pablo talk French. Then some of these later people that come in later, like Lozos and Greniers and them, of course they all talk French. Rouilles.
And that French came in with the trappers, I guess. The French trappers.
No, I just don't know how that come in now. Now my granddad, Dishaw, as near as I figure, they come out of California up. Because he had a brother who was in Colorado, Charlie, I think his name was. And then his sister, she and her married and lives on the Wind River in Wyoming. So it could have been traders and everything.
Did you grow up speaking Indian? Did you know how?
Well, that's what I said. It was
Yeah.
talked in our house all the time. But we didn't have to talk Indian because we talked English amongst ourselves.
Did you know how to speak French?
Oh, when we went to school, we knew a few words, but we forgot most of it. I think some of them Morsjos, well, a lot of them in later years, they talk French, like old Dewey Matt and all them, they talk good French.
Okay. I was wondering what the extent was of Indian farming and gardening before 1910.
Well, some of the old Indians had little gardens and well, some of them, I guess, went more to preserving drying their fruit and stuff like that, but I think quite a few of them older ones that had gardens. Of course, they didn't live like they do now in bunches. Each Indian lived on his own place. He lived up along these creeks, and up some of them up there around Dayton and Elmo, and up there Summers in the early days, those Kootenays there. They lived along the lake. Some of them moved away from the lake and lived up on them creeks, like Dayton Creek. There was 5 or 6 or 8, maybe more families than that up Dayton Creek. And Valley Creek, there's a lot of Indians in there. Up Crow Creek, there's a lot of Indians along Crow Creek. Hammers and Redhorns and Beaverheads and Chief Eagles, some Finleys, different ones in there.
Did Indians? I'm sorry.
But this bunching up in this housing deal, I don't know if it's through health deal or what it is. They claim they had to centralize them for water systems and stuff. But I think they'd have been better off than let them go out on little places and build them up, got them away from these housing areas. These housing areas, as near as I can see, there's no future to them. There's no place for a garden behind them. The houses is right next to one another. And there's some of the boys is realizing it, and they're moved away from them. And the ones that stays there, if you ain't got a job, you ain't got nothing. Outside of maybe getting these commodities or something. I didn't like to see it when I come in. I thought if you build a house, build it up someplace where you... Well, Pablo had a good start. My grandson started it up there, and he had a good house, and he had a good big yard with it. He had a lawn and a little garden spot. But these down here and them up at Arley, they're just putting their back to back. And there was some of the people would have liked to get on their own place.
Did Indians live each on their own place even before allotment?
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah. Yeah, that's what I say. These old fellers up along Crow Creek and Blow Mission Dam, there was 2, 3 homes. And up towards Pistol Creek, there was some Indians living up there. And right where where the Krells, Buffalo Krells are now, or the next draw over from that, there used to be a family Indian there before the park was made up. I think old Louis Coral and his wife, he called her Old Lady Beaverfoot. I think that's where they lived. And yeah, they were pretty well stretched out. And it was quite I think there was quite a bit of the teaching of the Jesuits. See, they come into Stevensville, and then they branched out, and then they went down in that country around Priest River, someplace down there. That's where they wanted to set up a mission, and then they decided they could have had a flood damage and things, and that's when they changed and moved up here. Established this one in 1854. And they had a lot of Indian following then.
So when the Allotment Act came in, Indians already, did they get allotments where they were already living anyway, or?
Well, a lot of them fellers that after they had that Allotment Act where they allotted them where they were living, like where I was born. That's allotment that Joe's dad got. Then we had Has 1, 2, has 3 allotments there. My 3 brothers. Then up on the foothills where Bob Walters, me and my 2 sisters was allotted up there. And then from the old Hudson Bay house down to the creek there where Weber lived, well, my uncle's allotments was there, his wife, and I think 2 daughters and a son, and himself. That's where they were allotted. And over across there where Bearhead was, that was some of the Dandy Jim family. They were allotted there. So most of them got a lot of their land where they were living. My mother and my brother, they were allotted down on the river, down there in Moise. But the things change. Everything's changed. Farming's changed. So I know one time you could stand up there by my granddad and you could spot 4 thrashing machines out in the valley there thrashing grain. It wasn't made its hay then. And that's one thing I think that what made so many waterfowls and upland birds. There's a lot of